Namaskar, welcome to Sansad TV. You are watching our special program on emerging and critical tech for India, Budget 2024. This is your host Manish Kumar. While India is marching on building a greater economy with an ambition to reach USD 7 trillion by 2030, the quest for smart and advanced technology is imperative. It must be addressed under the national mission. The government has laid out a comprehensive plan to spur the research and development in emerging and critical tech for India in various policies and in interim budget 2024. Also, government has announced a 1 lakh corpus for long-term funding of R&D, including deep defense technology. Since such technology are not shared by many advanced economies, can India embrace the challenges and even leapfrog? To talk on such important issues, we have two distinguished guests here. Let me introduce Abhay Karandikar, who is Secretary, Department of Science and Technology, Government of India. Earlier, he also led the prestigious IIT Khandpal as a director. And let me introduce Ajay Kumar, who has served as Defense Secretary and Secretary Defense Production. He has also served as Principal Secretary IIT, Secretary in the MIT Department, and now a distinguished visiting faculty at IIT Khandpal. I welcome you on Sansad TV, sir. Let me begin by asking, what are the priorities for India in the realm of critical and emerging technology? I begin with Dr. Abhay, if you start talking about the priorities, because the area is so vast and technology game is so huge.
So, I think let me just tell you that there are certain sectors where we as a country have laid out certain priorities. So, one of the areas in larger context of critical and emerging technologies is quantum technologies, quantum computing and communications. And in fact, the Government of India has launched a major national mission on quantum recently, which DST is piloting. Another is artificial intelligence, AI, then semiconductors, clean energy, and particularly, the hydrogen, green hydrogen economy. And lastly, I think in biomanufacturing and bioeconomy. So, these are certain critical and emerging sectors where we as a country have set out priorities. There are national missions and policies where we are actively promoting the technology development and adaptation in these areas.
Dr. Kumar has been involved by many discussions in the past, and he has led many initiatives, especially in the defense technology, and the military technology is a game changer, sir. But then again, the range is vast. So we need from advanced material to jet engine to address some of the even additive technology for the production timeline. Where do you prioritize among all this?
I think first of all, I want to say I agree with what Dr. Karandikar said. There are certain areas where we have shown initial momentum, and therefore we should give thrust to them. Very important area is defense, and defense is important because history has shown that development in defense and military technologies have helped nations to actually reach much more advanced technology than in any other field.
Right.
We in India have in the last 70 years largely been dependent on imported technology. In the last 4 or 5 years, we have now seen an innovation ecosystem which is working, and most of this ecosystem is in areas where the country has natural strengths. Software related data analytics, artificial intelligence, we find in quantum. We have found now significant interest in chip design. So, I think developing capabilities in these new areas. Yet another huge area in which we are finding tremendous amount of traction is space. And today we are finding large number of innovations happening at all verticals of space, whether it is on the launch side, whether it is on the satellite side, whether it is on the payload side, whether it is on the ground station side, whether it is on the analysis side. So, in each of these areas there is tremendous amount of traction. So, I would like to say, I think the way forward would be to give thrust to areas where we are seeing a critical mass of innovation developing, and a governmental push in areas to create critical mass in those sectors where we are not finding that much of traction.
I agree with you, and fundamentally, as Dr. Kumar has pointed out, military technology has brought many things which later being used in the civilian sphere, for example, the global positioning system and many other technology. But fundamentally, these all depend on research and development. So far, we see the major portion, in fact, the entire portion of the research and development is solely taken by one or two agencies which is government owned. Perhaps DRDO is one of the example, and a few DPSU. How do you see we can scale up beyond the realm of the government, how we can include the broader private sector to do much more and focus and put thrust on R&D? Your take on Dr. Abhay, since you have been also deeply involved first in academia and then in the government policy making. So your take on this, please.
So if you look at the global science and technology players in the world, then typically they spend about 2 to 3% of their GDP on the R&D. In India, we are spending only about 0.7% of the GDP on R&D. But more importantly, when you see that global ecosystem or other countries where they are spending 3 to 4% of their GDP on R&D, 70% of this spending is from the private sectors, and in some countries such as Korea it is even higher, it is up to the extent of 80%. But in India, the spending by the private sector in R&D has been limited to only 30 to 40%. And unless we increase the spend on R&D as a large percentage of the GDP, we cannot reach to that level where we want to really become a global player. Now, and as I said, that this spending cannot come from the government alone. It has to come from the private sectors by enhancing their R&D capabilities. Now, one efforts that recently the government has done is that we have set up the National Research Foundation, Anusandhan National Research Foundation, and as you know that the name is called foundation.
Right.
So therefore, one of the objectives has been to incentivize and enhance the funding from the private sector for the R&D support. And this need not come into the foundations directly. In fact, the government can co-fund the R&D projects along with the industry. So I think we really need to create an environment where the private sectors can increase its R&D spending, which will really supplement what the government efforts are there in funding R&D programs, in incentivizing entrepreneurs and startups. That I think will further get a boost.
If I echo your opinion and come back to again on the military sphere as a precursor to better technology, advanced technology, Dr. Kumar knows much deeply as he has held responsibility. And again, I come back to the DRDO. Look at the budget of DRDO, for example, is 23,000 crore. DRDO is put to innovate from bullet to tank to fighter jets, basically. And then there's an entire ecosystem and a private ecosystem which is developing but at very nascent stage. The whole idea and the challenge to how to include that. And also you have had a wonderful interface with academia, also the industry. Where do you see the harmony and also in terms of the policy making, where do we address that, sir?
Yeah, I'll just take you 20 years back. or maybe 30 years back, when the infrastructure development was primarily done based on government budgeting. And there is a limit to how much the government could have funded the infrastructure. And then government innovated and started using the PPP model. There were difficulties, and initially it was not so successful. But now you see, thanks to various type of PPP models, the scale at which infrastructure can be developed. For every 1 rupee put for infrastructure in government, it is possible to leverage anything between 3 to 4 rupees from the private sector in the infrastructure development.
Right.
The important point I wanted to make is to develop models. When we say that R&D in the private sector has to come up, we need to create models by which we incentivize the private sector and other bodies to be part of this R&D. Let me give you the example of IDEX, which is in defense. We used to provide the startups 1.5 crores, and the stipulation was that they should at least bring in matching contribution from their side to create the product.
Right.
What was the incentive? The incentive was that the product, if it is developed to the requirements of the armed forces will buy this to a certain specified quantity. Now, this is the model in which large number of startups came forward and started developing new products and new technologies. So, what we have done is we have given partial funding, we have got them to put in their own money by using the procurement of government, procurement needs of the government on this innovative technology. So, that is first point. The second point I want to make is, I think it is more than merely about funding. It is very important that we leverage the capability of other stakeholders. When we are looking at only government labs, whether it is DRDO, and I must say DRDO has done some fantastic work in large number of areas. Yes. But then there is a limited number of people who work in a constraints of the government system which is there. But the moment you open up, it is like you are leveraging the capability of the nation. Whether you are in academics, whether you are a startup, whether you are an industry, whether you are any other individual who is able to contribute, the framework should enable him to actually come up and use his ideas. Right. So, from a limited set of, let's say, DRDO or any few thousand people, you have suddenly several crore people who are actually working on a problem to solve it. And that is what we saw again in IDEX, that we opened up the whole capability of the nation to solve a problem. And the third thing which I want to say is that as a nation, we need to develop the culture of respecting and owning up our own products. The world does it. India is the world's largest global capability centers. The top Fortune 500 companies, 75% of them have developing their R&D here and going and keeping the IP elsewhere. But somehow, when a product is developed in India, people say, whether it is as good as the one developed outside, we have to start believing that we are creating the best products in the world. Look at what happened in COVID-19. That vaccine that we created in India turned out to be far better. I don't want to name other foreign companies who created the vaccines. Our results are far superior to that, and in other cases. So, this ability to actually own up our own products and recognize them as the best in the world. Dr. Abhay Karandikar here has standard essential patents for telecom in his name, which has been created. It is a great credit to have a global standard essential patent created here. And today, now he was the first who had created. Now there are large number of such patents which have been created in the country. A journey has started. We have to celebrate this culture of innovation and R&D in the country, so that more people will come into it, and that will. And the last part I want to say, which I think is very important from developing the R&D culture, we have to create rules and procedures which enable an R&D product developed in India to be used and procured by the government. Remember, if a R&D product is going to be produced, it is going to be the first one, that is why it's R&D. But very often, we in government tend to say we need 3 people to participate for the product to participate in a tender. We must realize that if it's an R&D product, it will be the first one, and therefore, there will not be 3 people. And therefore, systems to procure this on frameworks through which such an R&D product can be procured by the government will need to be created. That will enable and promote the R&D culture.
I think, Dr. Kumar, you have addressed all the fundamentals, and hit the right notes. And coming back to, it's the whole idea how to broaden the research and development in our country, which goes beyond the realm of government. That has been the point discussion. Government has also realized, in fact, in the budget 24, we're talking about government has focused the new mission and act, which is called Anusandhan Foundation Act 2023, which was launched by the government to boost R&D. Would be the game changer? We need some sort of policy like this. How are we going to spread out, say, is a great amount of corpus, which we talk about, 1 lakh crore, which government wants to build up across various sectors. It looks very ambitious, and how we address that. We also see, as Dr. Kumar has pointed out, some sort of corporate incentive to industry to do their R&D research. How these model work? As a secretary, how do you work out in the policy domain?
No, I think first of all, let me just tell you that as Dr. Ajay Kumar mentioned, that this IDEX model has been very, very successful, and one of the important objectives of the IDEX model was really to provide the much needed support to startups which have been working in the deep tech area and critical and emerging technologies. Now, in these technology systems, there is a certain longer gestation period, and you really need some kind of a patient capital. And although in the recent years we have seen a significant inflow of venture capitals in the startups and a significant investments by the private investors, yet the kind of patient capital that is needed in the deep tech startups or in the critical and emerging technologies has not happened that much. That should. All the venture capital investment and private sector's investment in the startups have been in those startups which are sort of safe startups, or in those areas where the high risks are there. There has been very less kind of investment, and in order to spur that investment, I think IDEX was definitely a model which has been quite successful. Now, that model sort of needs to be scaled across the sectors in all areas in a much larger way.
I would like to sort of narrow down our discussion more on some of the specific aspect of emerging and critical technology. The range is so vast, but then in all the technologies, there are few which are very pertinent, very important. For example, the very role of semiconductor and chip making, which goes into almost every aspect of our key technology equipment systems, from military to civilian, whether it is drones, the civilian drones or military drones, or avionics, or many different elements basically. Where are we now in these two technology? We also had issues and faced problem, because even we import even we manufacture something in India, the sensors part, which depend on the semiconductor, basically it has to be imported, has to be procured, and that's also security concern. How far we have reached? Government has focused much more on this particular aspect. I would like to know if the policy is in right direction, and we are moving in right direction, and how far we are able to succeed to have high quality chip manufacturing in India, and when.
I think maybe
to begin with, Dr. Kumar.
I just wanted to mention here that there are two aspects to semiconductor. One is the fab, and I think Dr. Ajay Kumar can dwell on it. But I also want to say that in India, we have a tremendous capacity in fabless semiconductor design and in chip designs. In fact, if you see all the major chip design companies, phablet design companies have their design R&D houses in the company in India, and those fabless designs are really done all by Indian engineers. So we have a huge capacity of creating a successful ecosystem of fabless chip design and designing of semiconductor on chips for various applications, not only for a market to serve Indian civil and defense market, but also could become globally competitive. Now, semiconductor fab is a sort of a different area because it requires huge investments compared to the fabless semiconductors or a chip design companies. In fabless chip design companies, I feel we should be treating this, as I just mentioned, as a deep tech startups which could be incentivized through programs like IDAX, and where the semiconductor companies can develop chipsets which are useful for the systems to be deployed in India, whether they are the telecom systems or whether they are the defense or whether they are in the medical devices or technologies, or whether they are in agri-tech and so on. And I'm sure, I think we must have a definite steps in that directions and incentivize companies and startups in that area. When it comes to semiconductor fab, it is like a huge investment that is required. It is not the work of some startups or something. This can only be done, if there is a substantial support from the government. In fact, this has happened world over. Even leading countries such as Taiwan and other things have had substantial government supports for semiconductor fab.
I think the United States has committed some $1 trillion, and also Indian government has also taken some huge steps. I would like to come back to Dr. Kumar. How is unfolding? Because this is really the heart of the critical and emerging technology as far as the chip making and semiconductor areas are concerned. Also keeping, if you budget, though it's an interim budget, but we have taken something out of that. If you can take out on the policy part, also keeping the budget in your mind,
So let me talk about this announcement which you mentioned for 1 lakh crore. I think this has not received adequate attention. We are looking at a historic watershed moment in the history of the nation, and I say this with full responsibility. 75 years and we are still largely, except a few exceptions, a service nation. And when I say service, I am also including manufacturing services as part of the service. We have not been creating products. And like I said, there may be few exceptions, but as a broad category, today this announcement of 1 lakh crore actually heralds moving the nation from a service economy to a product nation. And why this is so important? Please remember, as a service economy, you can only go at this far and not further. And what do I mean by saying that? The rate of growth with the service economy, because service economy typically works on the arbitrage of the service that it provides. For example, when you are doing software services, you may get 20%, 30% of the over the labor cost for which the service has been provided. Right. That is typically how it works. But the person who actually develops the product, as we know most of the product companies do, get 50, 60, 70% profit over a long period of time. So the moment you start becoming product nation, your rate of growth, which is today hovering from 6 to 7%, can go to 9 to 10%. And therefore, what it implies is that we in India today, we are looking to get into a middle income level.
So it's a direct correlation with the economic growth.
And absolutely, if we want to become a developed nation in the next 20 years, we have to become a product nation. And this is why this announcement is so important.
Dr. Kumar, in the paucity of time, but this is last but very critical questions again. The lack of higher standard of research, especially in our academia, barring few IITs and ICs, is a challenge. You come from a deep academia and IIT, very prestigious institution. Where do you see the lacuna? How we can address that? Because this is all about the larger research and technology base which comes out of academia around the world. If we see many advanced countries, including Nordic, also the European countries. Quick note on this.
Yeah, so I think you are absolutely right. In fact, this is also reflected in the fact that in terms of full-time equivalent R&D personnel in our country is really low compared to a global average. And that is clearly because we don't have both the quality and also the quantity in terms of the R&D, like at the PhD level, in our academic institutions in science and engineering. In fact, this fact has been recognized in the national education policy, where it has been clearly mentioned that we need to boost the research and R&D ecosystem in other tier 2, tier 3 universities, state universities and colleges. And the NRF, which we just spoke, in fact, it is also one of the objectives of the NRF to see that how these tier 2, tier 3 institutions can be funded through the R&D programs. Now, currently, one of the problems in these institutions is that in many of these institutions, they also do not have the capacity to even absorb the funds, even if you fund, want to fund the R&D. And therefore, one of the ways, that we are thinking could be to create like an hub and spoke model where some of these institutions which have the capacity, which can come up, can be considered as spokes partner of the hubs which have been created in tier 1 institutions like IITs and ISCs in some of the national missions that we are going to launch, whether it is in quantum or AI or in cyber physical systems, where the capacity of these tier 2, tier 3 institutions can be enhanced by making them as spokes partners of hubs. And maybe in the next few years, 5-10 years, once the capacity of these institutions increases, then I think they can also be competitive with IITs and ISC. So I think this is definitely one area where we need to focus, and this has been recognized both in our national education policy and NRF.
I thank you both for your valuable insights. As India is marching towards a greater economy, technology plays a critical role. This is Manish Kumar signing off from Sansad TV. I thank you both. Thank you.